On the night of February 17, 1864, 8 men crammed into a small submarine called the H.L. Hunley in Charleston Harbor. Their mission was to sink the USS Housatonic, a Union steam-powered sloop of war. Did they succeed and live to tell their story? The crew of the Hunley had to have known the dangers they were facing that fateful night in February of 1864. It was probably a cold night, the air damp, and the men shoulder to shoulder in the narrow vessel. The odds were against them coming back alive. 14 men had drowned in this vessel on 2 occasions prior to this dive, and it almost seemed as though a dreaded curse would befall them too. But for this period in history, the Hunley was pretty amazing, even if it had a really bad track record. The entire vessel was just about 40 feet long, and as legend tells it, was made from a cast-off steam boiler. It was designed for a crew of 8, 7 to turn the hand crank propeller and 1 to steer and direct the submarine. Unlike modern torpedoes, which use propulsion to hit their target, the Hunley used a long shaft attached to the bow. At the end of the shaft was an explosive armament containing 135 pounds of black powder.
So by the mid-19th century, people understood the concept. They understood that it was possible to make something like this, but they were trying different ways to make them work, different ways to use them in a war situation. And of course, during the Civil War, when you had the war going on, there was a lot of necessity to try and come up with things. And so people were experimenting with different designs, and the Hunley was one of these. The Hunley's significance, as has been said before, is that it was the first submarine to sink a ship. So you have to look at how they did that and why they were successful. A lot of it was determination. They didn't have the technology to put an engine that would allow them to go underwater, so they made it hand-powered. So if you're willing, or if you're able to get a crew that can go on board and turn a hand crank for a number of hours, then you can make it work. Determination to do that, and maybe desperation a little bit. So the design was unique. There was no other submarine like it, but there were lots of similar vessels of the period. And the Hunley sort of struck upon, we don't know if this was intentional or not, but their final design was very similar to, and almost could be viewed as a precursor to more modern submarines of the World War I and World War II period. They went away from a sort of a bell shape and went to more, they called it the fish boat, more of a fish design. It wasn't cigar shaped, it had a higher profile, so it's more resistant to turning or being turned or rocking, and can stay upright a little bit easier. And this is sort of a general design that was copied or used later, and the Hunley kind of foreshadowed that.
It would be a long trip to meet up with their target, about 5 miles in total. But shortly after 8 p.m., a large explosion rocked the Housatonic, and within 5 minutes it would be at the bottom of the harbor with 5 of its crewmen. The Hunley was victorious and was the first combat submarine to sink a warship. But the Hunley never resurfaced. Many claimed to see signal lights coming from the sub after it had rammed the Housatonic. But where were the victorious heroes? For many years after the Civil War ended, the Hunley and her crew lay quietly in their saltwater grave. Then on May 3rd, 1995, they were found 100 yards away and on the seaward side of the Housatonic in 27 feet of water. The crew took the mystery of their demise with them, but investigations are still underway today to discover what happened to the Hunley and her crew.